Hello there everyone, so welcome to a faction overview, in this case of the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, so let's check that out. So basically, let's go for them. Only 3 more reviews to go, that's awesome. Okay, so the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, I'm going to talk about this right here, the hold 40 regions thing, while we start. So basically, I consider this kind of like an easier to medium campaign. Because of that, since they have no specific enemies, you're kind of easily going and just conquering anything that you would like. And of course, you can always pick the easier factions. You can always pick the easier stuff to do. Now, you do start surrounded by enemies, and you start at war with lots of them, but you still can't sue for peace, and that will happen for sure. Not with the elves, I can tell you already, but it does happen. So, okay, you have a wandering people. By the way, that's what happens here in Khazad-dûm. And 1 second. Actually, hang on. Just because I'm actually recording, this is happening. Usually it would be faster. Right? It's just taking into consideration that Khazad-dûm is kind of like conquered by you, and then they go as wandering people. Right. So I cannot even check that. I mean, oh, I pressed space and everything went okay. So I can occupy Khazad-dûm. That's perfect. That's great. I'm gonna show you. Yeah, so the dwarves of Khazad-dûm are here. So now I can show you what I wanted. Hold 40 regions, including Goblin Town. Pretty easy. And in terms of diplomacy, you are allied with Mordor and the remnants of Angmar, which is good. You know, basically 2 strong factions to be allied with. But then you have all these enemies. However, don't be surprised with what I'm going to say. They're not really that important as enemies. I mean, basically you'll fight Imladris and the Vale of Anduin, if anything, and sometime in the near future, perhaps the realm of the Galadrim or the Woodland Realm. You can actually rush a couple of these guys. I mean, the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, they will approach you, but it's going to take them quite a while. And the dwarves of Erluin and Northern Dúnedain are a little bit too far away, as well as the Woodland Realm. You know, they're not going to be focusing against you. So pretty much you start against Imladris and you start against the Vale of Anduin. And you actually have good units to deal with both of these. Like, you can rush. So I'm going to just straight up state that this is one of the factions that has a lot of replay value, because the way that you do things is really interesting. Like, you can start and just rush the elven factions of the Galadrim or Imladris. You can just rush the Vale and get a very solid foothold while trying to maintain and defend these places. And that's why it gives them so much replay value. Now, you do start surrounded, but as I'm saying this, it actually means lots of options for you. Amazingly, you actually have an early expansion route. There's some easy neutral pickings, and you can also go for some nearby pickings, as you know, taking some places from the Vale of Anduin, for instance. Now, the dwarves of Erebor will kindly attack you. I mean, I didn't see any attacks from them on the first 10 turns. And that's something to say about that. I mean, just Imladris actually attacked, and a little bit of the Vale of Anduin. So you gotta be watchful, of course, of attacks. And I mean, really make sure that you have enough spies. That's something that I would be checking. And also, every time that you end up the turn, just really check how are your forces, how is your border actually. Now, you also have lots of forts, and I mean, I consider this one of yours because you can just move troops there. So you have like 1 fort, 2, 3 forts. If I'm not mistaken, there's like a 4th around here. There's a 4th. There you go. So not only you have 4 forts, but you also have lots of fortresses. I mean, start with like 2. Well, most of them are actually huge cities, but still, you will have lots of free upkeep, which means that you can actually support lots of units early on. Now let's talk about the military, which is a big problem for these guys, but still not too much. Let's select a capital, and let me speak about those. Oh, it's building process. So, in terms of the stables, you already have 3 great units. I mean, you have Warg Riders. Basically, this would be just enough to have as a horseman unit or a mounted unit. But you also have the skirmishers that scare horses. Do remember that every single one scares horses. The skirmishers have a decent range and lots of missiles. You know, it's not the 5 is actually about the maximum that I've seen. I think 6 perhaps is the maximum, but usually it's like 3 or 4. So 5 missiles actually makes these Warg skirmishers a little bit more effective. And you also have bulk champions, which is really awesome heavy cavalry. I mean, they are worth this value, trust me. Just because of the effect of their charge, the fact that they scare horses, you know, it's really awesome. The excellent stamina, like you can run with these guys forever and there's no problem. And then this charge and attack and defense, just use these guys. Do remember that they do not have shield. Now let's speak a little bit about the barracks. That's where they actually have interesting units. So you have the Goblin infantry, which is kind of better than their other counterparts, but it's still not the ones that they would use. Still, they're very low in upkeep. This is something that the Mountain Orcs actually have. Very cheap units and very cheap upkeep. And especially, the upkeep is very cheap considering the finances that you're gonna have. I'm gonna go into it very soon. So let's speak about these Mountain Orc Hunters. Now, they're effective against armor. With this attack, just field as many as you can from these guys. These should actually be the main unit that you would use against early dwarven or even elven armies. I mean, just perfect. Then you have the black Uruk, black Uruks of the mountains. You know, heavy in upkeep. I do not like the fact that they are not actually effective against the armor. If they were, then I would give them a very good thumbs up. If not, just don't bother too much with these guys. You will actually have very decent alternatives to these guys, because these are kind of used like shock troops, but they don't have the effective against armor. And for their cost, I wouldn't actually get too many of them. They're like, yeah, they're heavy infantry, but it's nothing like really special about them. Maybe the frightened nearby enemy infantry, for instance. Now you have the heavy Goblin halberd. Now, skilled against mounts, and they have the effective against armor. That's why I really love this Goblin halberd. Some of these, you know, they're just pikes and they're not halberds. So some of them do not have those effective against armor effects, but these ones have, and they're kind of like in upkeep about like really effective on that. Like think under 300 for a heavy Goblin halberd, like a top end halberd unit. It's really cool. You also have the heavy Goblin infantry. Now this is what I wanted to speak, because of course you would get the black Urks of the mountains, but you know, for this cost, I would honestly just go with a couple of heavy Goblin infantries, you know, and they'll do exactly the same idea. Of course, these are better units. That's not what I'm talking. I'm discussing regarding the recruitment cost and upkeep. I don't feel like it's enough. I would like the effective against armor, or even charge defense or something like if against mounts. That would make it much better. So let's speak about the Ruder Savages. Now these are good effective against armor units that you can also get alongside the Mountain Orc Hunters, which is, it just makes sure that, you know, already you have 3 units against armor, which is awesome, you know. Now let's go with the Ruder Pikemen, your basic spearman unit, I would say. They're skilled against mounts, you know. These are the units that you're probably going to get before getting the heavy Goblin halberds, in order to deal with cavalry, of course. And you also have the Goblin Band, you know, very cheap, reliable spearman unit. You know, just they're very numerous. That's why they are quite effective. So just use them against the early mounts. That will be awesome. Right? So let's get into the ranges. Unlike this is a good thing, because unlike the remnants of Angmar, they actually have good archers. So the Goblin archers, they are the basic unit, you know, the initial one, not very good, cheap but not really that good. But then you have the upgrade with the heavy Goblin archers. Now these are at least decent units. They actually have 4 more missiles, missile attack 4. Not this cheap upkeep for this kind of unit, but at least you have these guys. And then you have the heavy Goblin crossbowmer, yet another effective against armor, with a missile attack of 9 and the same cost as the Goblin archers, with just a little bit less range. So I would say that it's actually quite good, considering that you're talking about a Goblin faction. Add to that the fact that you can actually get cave trolls. So you have a former troll that you know has a powerful charge. These guys should be sent against any heavy infantry, cavalry, or whatever. Just send them; they'll destroy that specific unit. It's actually really cool to use them as flanking units as well, so it's pretty nice. Also very effective to send against pike lines. Now, in terms of the siege, a little bit of a problem that you don't have actually troll catapults. That would be the added situation. So, oh yeah, I wanted to speak about these guys finally. So you also have the Snaggers units. Now they're very cheap for their cost. I mean, 86 in upkeep. Even though you have to consider these attacks and defenses and stuff, but they will still be quite reliable under a general. So I would honestly use these guys, especially the Snagger skirmishers. Most likely I would hire lots of these skirmishers, because they can still cause a lot of damage to, you know, some enemies, especially earlier on. So they're a very cheap way to recruit some cheap units to garrison. Of course I wouldn't make an army out of these guys, but they're so free in upkeep that it's almost free that you will never be running short out of units, you know. Basically you have these cheap units that you will always be able to hire, like, oh my god, he's attacking, let's get some snaggers at least. You know, that also causes the AI to be a little bit more careful when attacking you. The shrines, it actually provides an experience bonus, so do consider getting some Dark Temple of Melkor, especially where you're recruiting more units. Let's talk about the bodyguards. Now this is where they actually fail a little bit and where they win a bit. I'm going to explain why. So it's a basic swordsman unit, nothing too fancy about it. You know, it's probably the last favorable bodyguard. I mean, you'll never actually use these guys in battle unless you're completely sure that the general is not going to die. You're going to have to be careful about archers, about wargs, about special units, about cavalry. You know, that's always a problem, and even effective against armor units. So it really narrows down the number of units that you can send these guys in safely. But there's this added bonus. You know, the upkeep so low makes it very good, so that you will always have generals with your armies, which should be numerous because you actually have everything to do with that. Now you can also recruit some raider warbands. Now these guys aren't really interesting, but I would like to give a second thought to the raider skirmishers. Now they're skilled against mounts with a missile attack of 6 and with this very low upkeep. Now these should be, consider them like an upgrade to the Snaggers, and maybe you'll be able to have these on the front lines to soak in the early enemy charge. They're just so kind of free in upkeep and very numerous, so you can recruit them everywhere. You know, just use them as bait. That will work out perfectly for you. Okay, so I wanted to talk regarding the finances. They actually have great econ, but you can't actually lose anything. And this is the biggest problem of this faction. It's just because they are so spread out, you actually need to concentrate at least on killing enemies and not on just general overall conquest. You know, you have to concentrate on finishing off an enemy as fast as you can, because you have so many and in all sides. If you can't go to peace with them, finish them as fast as you can. You know, I don't mean rush Imladris, but just make sure that they don't get to a good point. Like before turn 50, you should already have Imladris' capital, or at least siege it for a while. Now let's speak about those mines that I told you about. So these, just in a general sense, I'm going to show you. 300 from the Goblin Town one. Dane's Halls provides 750. Khazad-dûm West 150, not a lot, but Khazad-dûm provides like 1,200. So make sure that you own and keep Khazad-dûm. It just provides a lot of income. Come on, 1,200, that's a lot of units. And that's just the first one. You also have Gundabad with 330. 930 with Zakkala, one of the most important fortresses for you to hold. And there we go back. And additionally, this place, this village actually has another mines, and that's actually gold mines. So you will always have good stuff to get to, good places to get to that will provide you a lot of income through mines. Just prioritize those guys. Now I would like to note just a little bit regarding the, mercenaries aren't really interesting, but at least they're goblins and they're cheap. But I wanted to talk about the bodyguard units. So you have a couple of them. They are night fighters, there's several of them, but you also have these mountain orc hunters. Do note that they actually have the chanting ability. I forgot to talk about that. It's actually cool that you have different units, or that you start with different units, and I'll show you that you actually start with a couple of interesting units, such as these. Oh, that's not it. Where is it? I think it's this guy. No, these are just orc bodyguards. Hang on a second. Let me see. I believe I have one very good unit that starts. Okay, you have the Gundabad Guard. These aren't really bad, just again the same. I like that they are at least skilled against mounts, so you're not fearing cavalry. But still, that's of course your faction leader, which is quite nice. I mean, anything above 5-star, I already consider it to be good. And you have several decent generals here. So let me just see a couple of more. If I'm not mistaken, I have something that's not an orc bodyguard. That's like interesting. Yeah, you also have a unit of black Wargs of the mountains, but that's fine. You have the orc drought ability in some of these guys, which is awesome. This is your hair, by the way. Now, you start with lots of goblins and snagas everywhere, which means that you can actually go toe-to-toe with the Vale of Anrin pretty easily. I mean, they are quite vulnerable to that. You also start with some heavy goblin infantry. It's kind of sad that you do not start with a halberd unit, but probably that will make it completely overpowered. You do start with a Warg Rider here, and you would have to face a couple of rebel units in order to search and go to Anon and Oroth or something like that. Okay, but do consider that if you manage to at least check that Galadrim is under siege from Dol Guldur, then you'll be quite safe and you can expand here. If you can see that Imladris is actually under some form of attack, for instance, from the realm of Angmar, then you can actually attack it yourself or just concentrate on the Vale. You have those options, so make sure that you use those. So, okay, you actually start with a spy, and in addition to that, I believe you can actually recruit 2 diplomats. So you can recruit a diplomat here, and you can recruit a diplomat here in Khazad-dûm. So you have a lots of units available. I mean, if you could recruit every single unit that you have, that would be awesome. And they're actually quite decent in terms of the replenishment. I mean, just because of the number of cities that you start with, and that everyone can actually produce those units. So it's quite interesting, guys. I think it's a very interesting faction to play with. Most of the early game will be difficult, but after that, if you can actually finish off Imladris or the Vale really fast, then you'll certainly have a very easy task. So, and certainly very interesting because of all the different units and this kind of spread out location, but yet still defendable, So yeah, that'll be it. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's certainly a very interesting faction. I became a little bit interested on them, and I think maybe I'll play them very soon. But I'll let you guys decide as well on the faction vote. But that won't be for the that will be for just the near future. Regarding this episode, that'll be it. And don't forget to check out the Isengard one coming right tomorrow. Bye bye, guys. See you.